All right, it's time to get started. Welcome back. I hope you had a good weekend. We do have our first homework due tomorrow night, so check it out. About half of you have already done it, so that's great. You should send it into Gradescope. And also, don't forget to write your math chat question. I've gotten some of those too, which I've enjoyed looking at. Those are not due for another week, but something to think about. Anybody have questions concerning the homeworks? Yeah?
You don't have to answer your math chat question.
No. It's meant to be like an open-ended question that you don't necessarily know the answer to, or that doesn't actually have a specific answer. Yeah. In fact, if you already know the answer, you probably shouldn't use that as your question, because that's not the point. Great. All right, let's continue talking then about the ranked choice voting. I want to talk about a little more about ranked choice voting in the real world and the way that it's particularly done in the United States. And there are a few places in the United States where we do use the ranked choice voting. But just to refresh our memories about the system and how it works, I'm not sure why the screen has black bars around. Was it always like that? I don't know why. I set it up the same way, but yeah. I hope you don't mind. Distracting to me. I just won't look at it. Let's try and refresh our memory by thinking again about this Bush-Gore-Nader election. I hope you remember the basic situation that happened between Bush versus Gore and Nader. Remember, Bush and Gore, this was the presidential election, specifically in the state of Florida in the year 2000. The rest of the election had already been more or less decided in terms of state by state. All of the vote totals were known. But in the state of Florida, the vote was too close to tell who was the actual winner at first. And but the winner in the state of Florida would determine the winner of the presidency overall. And it was Bush and Gore were the main candidates, but there was this outsider candidate, Nader, who was, in terms of the sort of liberal conservative spectrum, Nader was sort of on the same side as Gore and even further sort of more liberal than Gore. Anyway, let's, I will remind you of the vote totals. In real life, the vote totals were something like Bush was 2.9 million. Gore was also 2.9 million. Now the actual total, there was a difference of about 500 votes between them, but if you round it up, it's basically a tie. And then Nader got something like 0.1 million, all right? And people were upset about this election because everybody had this sort of idea, which is it's not possible to say this for sure because in the real world nobody asked them their opinions, but these people who voted for Nader, just because of the politics of these three guys, it is reasonable to assume that these people who voted for Nader would have preferred Gore rather than Bush. And that means that if Nader just didn't exist in this election, all of these people probably would have voted for Gore, and Gore would have been the winner of the election. Another way of saying the same thing is that in this election, there were more people in Florida who wanted Gore to win versus people who wanted Bush to win. But all the same, Bush ended up being the winner in real life because this was basically a tie, but if you look specifically, very carefully at the votes, it turned out that Bush had, at least in the official tally, slightly more votes than Gore. All right. Anyway, what if we had actually used the ranked choice voting in this election instead of the plurality system? That's what we use in real life in Florida, is the plurality system. What if we had used ranked choice voting? All right. Now, this is to some extent guesswork because, in real life we didn't use the ranked choice voting. But we can try to be very specific about what sorts of guessing assumptions we're making. All right, what if we had used ranked choice voting? The votes might have looked like I'm going to try and make one of these sort of like ranked choice, columns chart here describing people's preferences. And I would like to think about, what about the Bush voters? All these 2.9 million people who voted for Bush, can we try to imagine what their preferences would have looked like? Certainly, I mean, they actually voted for Bush, so we can assume their first choice would have been Bush, because that's how they actually voted. Anybody have any thoughts about the other two? So would these 2.9 million people, would they have said Bush, then Gore, then Nader? Or would they have said Bush, then Nader, then Gore, if we asked them their opinions? Yeah?
Probably Gore than Nader, because Gore was closer, like if you put all three on the line.
Yeah, right.
Gore was closer to
If you think of this in terms of the sort of liberal conservative spectrum, as I did last time, liberal conservative cores, cons. Yeah, you have, in this case, sort of Bush over here, Gore over here, and Nader over here, all right? And so it is reasonable to assume the people who voted for Bush as their favorite, they would not have said Nader's my second favorite. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, maybe, people can be quirky, but for the most part, these people probably would have put Gore as their second choice and Nader as their last choice, all right? It is reasonable to assume this. And what I'm saying here, this is, like I said, somewhat conjectural and guesswork, but in terms of like political analysis, after this election happened, basically everybody came to the same conclusions that I'm about to tell you. So this is not my own personal guesswork or whatever. Okay, those are the Bush voters. What about the Gore voters? There are 2.9 million Gore voters who they would put Gore on top. Now, for these people, I think it's much harder to say what they would have chose for their second choice, just because Gore is already kind of in the middle of these other two options, and maybe there are super liberal people who voted for Gore who would have put Nader as their second choice, but maybe there are kind of like moderate people who voted for Gore but would have put Bush as their second choice. But I am going to, just for the sake of doing this in an interesting way, I'm going to say those 2.9 million people would have said Gore, then Bush, then Nader. So this right here is probably not realistic. She's sick of the politics.
Oh no, I'm just in the bathroom.
Okay. This is probably not realistic, but I am being, this sort of, I will say, this is a guess that's favorable to Bush, right? I put Bush in the center position for all of these voters. Probably that's not realistic. Probably a lot of these voters would have put Bush at the end, but just for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm going to give Bush a boost here and put him in the middle for all of those voters. All right, and then the Nader voters, that's a 0.1 million. And the Nader voters, they would have put Nader first. What do you think in terms of the other choices? Would they have said Gore then Bush or Bush then Gore? Yeah, they would have said Gore then Bush, probably. Again, this is just a guess, but according to the politics of these three people, it makes sense for a Nader voter to list Gore as their second choice. It doesn't make a lot of sense for a Nader voter to put Bush as their second choice. So this would have said Nader, Gore, Bush. All right? Great. Let's see if we can actually find the results. So let me just say one more time. This is a guess. But my guess here is favorable to Bush, right? So this is a conjecture to some extent, but my conjecture is giving Bush the maximum benefit of the doubt. All right. Now, what if we had used the ranked choice voting in this setting? So I hope we all remember how to do the ranked choice voting. Let's find the results using the ranked choice voting. In the first round, we look at Bush, Gore, Nader, and count up their first place votes in the original tally, and they are, what I wrote before. 2.9 million people put Bush first, 2.9 million put Gore first, and 0.1 million put Nader first. Almost nobody really wanted Nader to win this election. All right. And now here you might, like in a traditional election, you would say there's a tie in this round, although that is not relevant. When we're doing the ranked choice, a tie for winning doesn't matter because we're going to eliminate the loser. So here we eliminate Nader. And then we recalculate the votes in the second round. So for round 2, I'm going to copy the chart down. Sorry, I scrolled the numbers. The chart now says 2.9 million. The first column says now Bush-Gore. The second column now says Gore-Bush. And the last column now says Gore-Bush. All right, I'm redrawing the chart without any of the naders because nader was eliminated in the first round. And now we count up the votes again. This time I see Bush has 2.9 million. Gore, though, has 2.9 plus the other 0.1. All the naders' votes are counted now in this round for Gore. So Gore this time gets 2.9 plus 0.1, which is, of course, 3.0, and Gore wins. All right? So the moral of the story here is if we had used ranked choice, the ranked choice voting, probably Gore would have been president instead of George W., right? I say probably because, I mean, this is based on this kind of conjectural thing. But remember, all of the conjecture or all the guessing was done in a way which is most favorable to Bush. So this is, and this is essentially an uncontroversial viewpoint. Basically, everybody who analyzed this election came to the same conclusion. All right, if we had used the ranked choice voting, probably Gore would have been the president. And for this reason, and this is something I'm going to mention a little bit later on. Today, generally speaking, Democrats love the ranked choice voting, and the Republicans hate it. This is hard to take for me personally. So my own political opinions. Well, I don't need to get into my own political opinions, but I'll just say I'm not a partisan. I don't love the Democratic Party, and I don't love the Republican Party, and I don't consider myself, I'm definitely not someone who supports this or that party. I have opinions, and I vote for people, but it's not because of what parties are in. But so to me, this is a little disappointing, just because the Democrats seem to love it because they think it makes them win, and the Republicans seem to hate it because they think that it makes them lose. But this is just like a mathematical system. It's not actually a system which favors Democrats for any kind of political reason. It is a fact that it would have made Gore become the president here, which the Democrats would have loved. And for the same reason, the Republicans would have hated it. So this is, in my opinion, an unfortunate sort of imbalance in the way that politicians talk about the system these days. And it means, from my point of view, if I hear a Democrat telling me that we should switch to ranked choice voting, I don't quite believe them, because I think on some level they're just saying that because they think it's going to make them win more, which is not a great reason, in my opinion. And for the same, by the same token, when I hear a Republican tell me we should not do ranked choice voting, it's probably because they think it's going to make them lose, which again is not a great reason in my opinion. All right, but I want to talk today about sort of some pros and cons of the ranked choice, and also how this works itself out in real-world elections in the United States. The big deal about the ranked choice, or the big, I will say something like the big promise of the ranked choice, is that it avoids what they call the vote splitting effect. Anybody heard this phrase before, vote splitting? Anyone know what that means? The vote splitting. Yeah? It won't be 50-50. It won't be 50-50. What do you mean by that?
Like if there's, if it was tied between Gore and Bush, but you had that later and then use ranked choice, it's not possible for the votes to split.
Yeah, that's true. It does have something to do with in a three-way competition. You certainly can't get 50-50-50, right? There's no way for that to happen. It has to do with splitting votes when people on the ballot are in similar parties or have similar opinions. So this is the vote splitting effect. This happens, I will say it like this. Vote splitting happens when two similar candidates appear on the ballot. Ballot against one opponent. Welcome back. When two similar candidates appear on the ballot against one opponent. For example, I don't know if you ever thought about this. Why is it when, say, we vote for the president, why are there always just one Democrat and just one Republican on the ballot? If the Democrats win, wouldn't it be better if they ran two Democrats on the ballot? Wouldn't that like make them win? The answer is no, actually that would make them lose. Why is that?
Because if like half of the people were Democratic voters vote for one and the other half vote for the other, then like the Democrats might not necessarily win because the votes aren't all going to one person.
Yeah, right. This actually, if two similar candidates appear on the ballot against one opponent, these two have a huge disadvantage in the plurality system. For example, if it's something like, if we're voting for, let's say, Democrat 1 versus Democrat 2 versus Republican, right? And let's imagine that half of the population is Democrat, half of the population is Republican. This basically guarantees the Republican will win in this election. Because like she said, all the Democratic voters are going to split their votes in some proportion between these two guys. But all of the Republicans will vote for this one, which means this one will get something like 50% of the votes, whereas these guys will have to split the other 50. They'll get like 25 each, right? Which looks like a blowout. It looks like the Republican destroys them. So if we're voting for these, then something like R gets all the Republican voters, but D1 and D2 need to split them. This is the vote splitting phenomenon. D1 and D2 need to split the Democrat voters. Which is a huge disadvantage. They basically cannot win this election unless there's almost no Republicans voting. This is a huge disadvantage. All right. This is the effect. This is the vote splitting effect. In the plurality system. And this is why we have, in our elections, only one candidate from each party. Because if the Democrats, the Democrats are allowed to run more than one candidate. It's just they never would, because this would be a disaster for them, because they would split the votes between their two candidates, and the Republicans would win easily in that case. All right. This is the vote splitting effect. Can anybody say why is this what I just said earlier is that this is not an issue if you use ranked choice voting? Anybody agree or disagree? What's the difference? If we use ranked choice voting instead, you can imagine, again, some kind of three-way competition between two Democrats and a Republican. Using the ranked choice, I think that the vote splitting is not an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think because when you rank them, anyone who's a Democrat would rank D1 and D2 over R, which would make R be eliminated. So the Democrat would win.
Yeah. The voters here, the Democratic voters, presumably would rank D1 and D2 together on the top of their ballot, right? And with the R below. And then in the first round, maybe probably the Ds will not win in the first round, but one of the Ds will get eliminated in the first round, and then all of the other Ds will transfer over to the other one in the second round. The second round will be between one of these D's and the R. And then it will be a more or less even competition, right? Because the whatever votes were split in the first round, they get kind of like unsplit, or they get recombined in the second round. So this is vote splitting. It's why we have only one candidate per party. But in the ranked choice system, this is less of a problem. And I'll try to say something like what she said. If, say, D1 and D2 split their votes, then one of them will be eliminated in round 1. And then round 2 is a more or less fair matchup between one Democrat and one Republican, right? I hope that makes sense what I'm saying here. This is sort of the main idea behind why people say the ranked choice is better than the plurality. Or if you talk to people who want ranked choice rather than plurality, this is one of the big reasons why. It allows you to, it eliminates this kind of vote splitting effect. At least that's what they say. Now, there are technical considerations that we're going to talk about, but this is a basic idea here. And you will see this in real life when they do ranked choice voting. Like I said, this is used in the state of Alaska. When they do ranked choice voting in Alaska in real life, they do have more than one Democrat on the ballot and more than one Republican on the ballot. And everything works out just fine. There is no issue about splitting the votes in this old way. All right. Let's say I want to talk about one little sort of technical detail that is slightly different in the real world than these more abstract examples that we've been talking about so far. So let's talk a little bit about real world ranked choice voting. So the idea, of course, is you, instead of just saying who your favorite candidate is, you rank your choices. Now, I don't know if you've ever voted for president, but when you vote for president, of course, there's always the Democrat and the Republican, and basically everybody is only thinking about those two choices. But there are other guys on the ballot. Sometimes there's like 7 or 8 different candidates on the ballot. And when I vote, I ignore all of the other ones because I already know who I'm going to vote for. And I do always vote for the Democrat or the Republican. In fact, I always vote for one of those rather than the other one, but I'm not going to say which one. Maybe you can guess just by the way I look. I don't know. When I vote, I just pick one of the two, and I don't even know who those other people are on the ballot. And there might be 7 or 8 of them, but I don't care about them at all. And I essentially have no opinion about this. For this reason, in the real world, voters don't actually need to rank all the choices. They don't need to rank all the options. This is good news for the voters because, like for me, voting for the president, there's only 2 that I've even heard of, maybe 2 or 3 that I've even heard of. Are you really going to make me rank all 8 of these choices when I have never even heard of 6 of them? That doesn't make any sense. For me as a voter, I want to rank the ones that I care about, and the rest of them I have no opinion about. So voters don't actually need to rank all the options. You rank only as many as you want. All right, and you can just leave some people out of your rankings entirely because it doesn't make sense to force the voters to rank everybody in elections where most of the candidates are going to be irrelevant anyway. So typical votes, typical sort of totals look something like this. Something like I'm going to make another one of these charts. Let's say I'm just using ABCs here. 5 people said ABC, 4 people said BAC, 2 people said CB. So these people left the A out. That means their vote, so the idea or like the meaning of this vote is my first choice is C. If C doesn't win, you should count my vote for B. And if B doesn't win, then don't count my vote at all. So this means either this person has no opinion about A or they are like an A hater and they say under no circumstances should my vote be counted for A. It's either C or B or nobody, all right? And this is actually something like how I might vote in a real election. If I only care about the Democrat or the Republican, I would rank my favorite first, maybe a second choice, and I probably wouldn't say anything else just because either I have no opinion about those other jokers or I don't want my vote to go for them in any situation. All right, next, I'm just saying a little bit more. How about 3 people say just A? That means A is my guy. I want to vote for them, but you should absolutely not count my vote for anybody else, all right? Or let's say, I'm just making up this example. Let's say 3 people say only C, all right? So these voters, what they are indicating on their ballot is, these are people who say something like my vote is for C, and don't count my vote for anybody else. All right? You can imagine people, I think if you ask people to vote for our president today, many people, and your choices are like Harris, Trump, or Jill Stein. She's the Green Party nominee. I think a lot of people would say my vote is Harris, and that's it. I do not want you to transfer a vote for Harris down to Trump, and I don't want you to transfer Harris down to Jill Stein, because a lot of Harris voters are Trump haters. And they would not say my first choice is Harris and then Trump. They would rather just say Harris or nobody, because they do not want their votes to be counted for the other guy in any situation. All right, this is what typical votes would look like. Anyway, we can still do the system just the same way that we've always done. So can we just try and do the ranked choice? So let's find the winner here. In terms of the math of doing this, does it even matter that some people have just left out some of their choices? It turns out actually it does matter a little bit, but we'll see what happens. So I'm going to do the rounds as always. Round 1, I go A, B, C. So A has here, you count up how many are in the top position, 5 and 3. So that's 8. So A gets 5 and 3, which is 8 votes in the top position. B, I see 4 and 4, so that's 8, right? And then C, I see 2 and 3, so 2 plus 3, which is 5. All right, we have a tie, 8 and 8, but that tie doesn't matter. What matters is who is the loser, and that is C. So C is eliminated. All right, I will draw the chart for the second round. And you will see something sort of slightly weird happens, or something kind of new that didn't happen before. Here I have 2 votes for C and then B. It's now just B because I'm eliminating C. Then 3 votes for just A. 4 for BCA is now BA. And this is the interesting part. What happens to the voters in the last column? There are now 3 votes for nobody, right? They used to say those votes used to be for C, but what this means is my vote is for C and you shouldn't count my vote for anybody else. So those votes do not get counted for A or B. I'm gonna, on my chart here, I'm gonna sort of do that, meaning there are now 3 votes for nobody, all right? And there's the official kind of word for this, which is used when people talk about ranked choice voting technically. These are now what we call exhausted votes. Exhausted meaning we have already eliminated everybody that those voters supported, all right? Exhausted votes, that is to say all their choices have been eliminated. And so they don't count for anything in the second round. That's how you handle the exhausted votes. Anybody have any thoughts about this? Is this somehow like unfair to those 3 people who voted? Because everybody else, their vote counted in both rounds. These people, their vote only counted in one round. Are they gonna be angry after the election because they're like, whoa, what did you do with my votes? You threw my votes away. You're rigging the election.
Wouldn't they have known before that because they only chose C as
Right.
their option?
Yes, this would be my concern to these people. These people, that was their choice, right? They voted for just C. What that means is, if C is eliminated, I don't want you to count my vote for anybody else. So this is what happens to such votes. All right, so this is not, these exhausted votes, the fact that we don't count them in the second round, that's not unfair to these people because these people chose to put themselves in this category. That's just how the system works if you decide to vote in that way. All right, anyway, we can still add these numbers up. We might as well say the results here, right? A gets, here I see 5 and 3, that's 8 again. And B now gets 4 and 2 and 4, which is 10. And so B wins. All right, I just wanted to do one example with the exhausted votes thing. These are important in the real world, all right? Any thoughts about that one? Great. Let's talk a little bit about I want to talk about a real life ranked choice election and sort of what people thought about it. You know, ranked choice in the United States is a fairly new thing. Maine started doing it, I think like 15 years ago or something. It hasn't been around for much longer than that in the United States, although it has been used for many decades in Australia, but American political pundits don't really care about Australia. So they all, if you watch the typical sort of Fox News, CNN types talking about ranked choice voting, they seem to have no knowledge that this is something that's actually existed for a long time and people have been using it uncontroversially for decades in other places because they don't care about Australia. Anyway, I would like to talk about a very interesting real life example. This is in the state of Alaska, special election of 2022. So in 2022, this is for the state representative, the Congress representative from the state of Alaska. Alaska is a small state by population, so they only get one representative. And their representative died, like in office while he was acting as the representative. And I don't remember this guy's name. He was some old white guy, Republican. He died, and so the rules for Alaska at least is if the guy dies while he's the congressman, you have another election more or less immediately. They gave you some time to do campaigns or whatever, and this is called the special election. So it happened in August of 2022, and the stakes, in terms of like how important this election was, the stakes were very low because there was another like regularly scheduled election in November. So whoever won this one was only going to be in Congress for like 3 months, and then they would immediately have another election. But anyway, this was the special election of 2022, and the candidates were Mary Peltola. She is a Democrat. Sarah Palin, who is a Republican, and kind of a MAGA-style Republican. She's big on Trump. Sarah Palin was already well known. I don't know if you've heard of her. She was the running mate of John McCain when he ran for president in, I believe, 2012. He was the guy, or maybe before that, 2008. John McCain ran against Obama and lost, but Palin was his vice presidential candidate, and she was very, I guess, controversial, I suppose, at the time. it was an interesting kind of media frenzy about Sarah Palin because she was portrayed in the media immediately as soon as John McCain picked her. There was like she was on the front page of, I think, Time magazine in this kind of like sexy jogging outfit. And she was presented as this like hot young lady politician who was also kind of an idiot. That was like her public image, which was, I don't know. I mean, maybe she is kind of an idiot. I don't. It's hard to actually tell with politicians how smart they are, in my opinion, because everything they say is like rehearsed and whatever. But very strange and somewhat problematic portrayal of Palin in the public eye. But anyway, she was the governor of the state of Alaska for a long time, and then she failed to become the vice president of the United States. Anyway, one more candidate, Nick Begich, who is not otherwise famous, but he was a Republican also, but he's sort of not MAGA. I don't think he's an enemy of Trump, but he's definitely more of a traditional old school Republican, whereas Sarah Palin is more of this kind of sort of wild, more populist sort of MAGA Republican. All right. Now, ordinarily, you would not run an election with three candidates like this because of the vote splitting effect. You would not put two Republicans on the same ballot. But because they're using ranked choice voting, actually that doesn't really matter. So this was done using ranked choice voting. And the totals are like so. Actually, there was, just for the sake of full disclosure, there was another Democrat on the ballot also. So the rules in Alaska are they always have a primary involving all the parties together, where it's voted traditionally, not ranked choice. And then the top four candidates from the primary get to participate in the straight up election, which is always done using the ranked choice. Anyway, the totals, when you look at the votes, so I'm going to, just because two of them start with P, I'm going to abbreviate using their first names, M, S, and N. I hope you don't mind. The totals were, these are in thousands. They were 48,000 said MNS. That's Mary, Nick, and then Sarah, using the first names. 34,000 said SNM. 27,000 said NSM. 24,000 said just M. 21,000 said just S. Now, I would I have more that I'm going to fill in here, but I would like to comment at this point. Voting just M makes a fair amount of sense to me because M is the only Democrat in this race. So if you are a hardcore Democrat, you would probably vote for just M and say, I'm voting for the Democrat. And in the second round, I don't want you to count my vote for anybody else, just the Democrat, right? 21 just for Sarah. This is kind of weird, given that there are two Republicans in this race. I would say this is part of the effect of the kind of division among Republicans between the hardcore MAGA Republicans and the more traditional old school Republicans. I would say these voters for Palin only, these are like hardcore Trump fans probably, who said, I want to vote for Palin, but I do not also want to support Nick Begich, all right? Another thing, this was kind of encouraged in the campaigning when Sarah Palin was doing her speeches or whatever. She, of course, concentrated on attacking the Democrat, but she also had some heat for Begich. She had some shade for Begich, which people after the fact said this was probably a bad idea for her to have convinced people to only vote for her and not list a second choice. Anyway, more choices. 16 million people said Begich, then Peltola, then Palin, NMS. This is also somewhat surprising. Here you have someone who put a Republican first, then a Democrat, then another Republican. I think it's fair to say these people are sort of traditional Republicans, but Sarah Palin haters, or maybe Trump haters, or something like that. They put Begich first, but they really don't like Palin, so they put Heltula in the middle. All right, anyway. 11 million people said just Begich. 5 million people said MSN. And 4 million people said SMN. All right. Yes?
Are we still in the thousands, or are we?
Yeah, these are all thousands. Yeah. Yeah, I just rounded everything. So if you go look up these numbers, these are rounded. All right. We got 10 minutes left on the clock. Maybe could we take 5 minutes and could I have you guys try and work this out? See who the winner is. It won't take you very long. Do the rounds. I'll give you a few minutes and then we can chat about it. Maybe I'll walk around and see how everybody's doing. You can add these up on a calculator if you like. These are slightly weird numbers. I'm going to write my answers here. That's how you should have started. I got 77 for. You took them on. Did you do the city beach? Good here? Should be this. Something's.
That's okay. I saw that. Yeah, I clicked it.
Doing good here? Yeah. Good, doing good. Okay. Can we go over this? I know some people are still working on it, that's fine. The numbers are a little weird and it's easy to mess this up if you copied the chart wrong or something like that. But I got 77 for M in the first round. For N, I got, it should be adding up all the columns which have N on top. That would be 27 plus 16 plus 11, which adds up to 54, I believe. And then S, that's all the ones with the S on top, which is 34 plus 21 plus 4. When I did this, I used my calculator ahead of time. I got 59. Anybody agree with those numbers? All right, I think most of you agree. Generally speaking, if you're doing this on a test or something and you like add up the numbers wrong, sometimes it is kind of a big deal. I mean, if you eliminate the wrong person in the first round, then everything you do after this will be messed up, unfortunately. But these numbers, hopefully you did them okay. So N is eliminated. This actually was not a big surprise that that Nick Begich got eliminated. He was kind of the odd man out anyway in terms of like the profile of these politicians. Sarah Palin was much better known. She's been around a long time. She has had very important positions. Unlike Begich is kind of nobody outside of Alaska has ever heard of Nick Begich. Anyway, round 2. We eliminate the Begiches. So now it says 48. So I'm taking out the N's. The first column now says MS. The second column now says SM. The third column, 27, now says SM. 24, still M. 21, still S. The 16 now says MS. The 11 is now exhausted. The 5 says MS, and the 4 says SM. All right, and now we add these up. When I did these numbers, I got 93 for M and 86 for S. Anybody agree? Great. All right, and so the winner is M, Peltola. This is what really happened in real life. She became the Congress person from Alaska, the first ever Native American elected to the United States Congress. She's a Native Alaskan, and this didn't really matter all that much because they immediately had another election in November. But when they did it again, it was again Peltola, Palin, and Begich, and Peltola won again the next time around. Which, I mean, it wasn't all that much time for anybody to change their minds about anything. So anyway, Peltola wins. Now, this was super controversial after the fact, in Alaska at least. The Republicans got real mad. The Republicans got mad. And I'll tell you a little bit next time about what some of the things that they said. But for example, Sarah Palin immediately submitted legislation to switch back to the plurality system. She was like, this is a terrible system because I lost. For me, like as an outsider looking at this, what I want to see when these people get mad, I hope that they're getting mad for reasons other than just, I lost so I don't like it. To me, that's not a good reason. So what did they actually have? Did they actually have anything of substance to object to other than, I don't like it because I lost? One thing that, that people didn't like, Republicans got mad, especially about the exhausted ballots. For some reason, this issue of the exhausted ballots is something that like people are uncomfortable with on some level. One thing that they said a lot is if the 11,000 people who voted for just N in the first round, those voters, 11,000 people said just N, if these had instead said 11,000 people vote Nick and then Sarah, right? If those 11,000 had instead voted like this, then they would not have been exhausted. They wouldn't have been exhausted in the second round. Instead, when Begich was eliminated, Begich gets cut out, these 11,000 would have voted for Sarah in the second round. And actually, you can see, if you look at these totals here, if you added another 11, then Sarah Palin actually would have won in that case. All right. So if these people who voted just for Nick Begich had instead also put Sarah Palin as their second choice, they wouldn't have exhausted. And so, actually, Palin's total in round 2 would have been 11 more than 86, right? 97, which would have made her win. So Palin would win, right? And everybody's, Palin, the people who were upset about this said, well, this is just, it's only because you throw those people's votes away, otherwise I would have won. My response to that as a nonpartisan outsider would be to say, like, these people chose to vote this way because they don't like you, Sarah. Like, that's what these voters are saying. These are Republicans who chose not to have their vote counted for Sarah Palin. And that's why she lost. I think the moral of the story for Sarah Palin is, the lesson she seems to have learned is, this is an unfair system because I lost. I think really the more appropriate lesson would be, if you're using this system while you're giving speeches or whatever, you need to convince these people to put you as their second choice. You should not attack this guy so much, because these people can still help you. And she didn't get their help, and that's why she lost. All right, more about that next time, and then we'll go on to something else.